Section 1. The Birth of Ooh. Origins, Creation, and the Making of a Masterpiece. Welcome. You found your way here, and that already tells me something about you. Maybe you're lying in bed right now with the lights off, or maybe you've got a candle going and the world outside has gone quiet. Wherever you are, you've picked a good night to settle in because we're going to talk about a show that started as a scribble in a young man's notebook and became one of the most quietly profound things that ever aired on television. This is Adventure Time. 160 facts, told slowly, told carefully, every detail worth knowing. So get comfortable. Let's begin. Fact 1. Adventure Time was created by a man named Pendleton Ward, who goes by Penn. He was born on September 23, 1982, and grew up in San Antonio, Texas. That's the youngest of three brothers. From a very early age, he was surrounded by art. His mother, Betty Ward, was an artist herself who worked alongside animators, and she became his first and most important inspiration. Before he could write full sentences, he was making flip books in the first grade, little hand-drawn animations that he'd flip with his thumb, watching the drawings come alive. That impulse, that need to make still things move, never left him. Fact 2. One of the most remarkable parts of this story is that Penn Ward's mother actually brought him, as a young child, to visit the home of Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons. She was looking for advice on behalf of her son, hoping the famous animator might offer some guidance. Groening recalled the visit at the San Diego Comic-Con panel for Adventure Time in 2011, though he admitted he couldn't remember exactly what advice he'd given. The idea of a small Texan boy sitting across from the man who made Homer Simpson, both of them in the same room, the future of animation quietly turning on that moment, is the kind of detail that sounds invented, but isn't. Fact 3. Penn Ward attended the California Institute of the Arts, known simply as CalArts, one of the most legendary animation schools in the world. It's a place that has produced an almost implausible number of important animators and storytellers. While he was there, he became close friends with J.G. Quintel, who would go on to create Regular Show, and Alex Hirsch, who later created Gravity Falls. The three of them were young, imaginative, and forming the creative instincts that would later reshape what animated television could look like and feel like. Fact 4. The very first version of Adventure Time was not a TV show. It was a 7-minute short film that Ward created for Frederator Studios, a production company known for developing animation talent through a program called Random Cartoons, which aired on the Nicktoons network. Ward pitched his storyboard with no agent, no formal representation, nothing. Frederator accepted pitches from anyone willing to show up and try, and Ward did exactly that. He boarded the short almost entirely on his own, figuring it out as he went. It was, as he put it, the first real job he'd ever had out of school, and it was the job that would define the rest of his career. Fact 5. In the original animated short, the main character wasn't called Finn. He was called Penn, named after Ward himself. The character was a young boy in a white hat who went on a fantasy adventure with a magical dog. Ward later changed the name to Finn because, in his own words, he didn't want to see his name on the back of sweatpants. That detail, that throwaway little joke of a reason, is entirely in keeping with the relaxed, slightly absurdist personality that would come to define the show's entire spirit. Fact 6. The Adventure Time short was completed and released in 2006 as part of the Random Cartoons lineup. In 2007, something unexpected happened. Someone uploaded the short to the internet and it went viral. By November of 2007, it had accumulated over 1 million views, which was a genuinely remarkable number for online video at that time. People were fascinated by it. The animation was simple, even a little crude in places, but the humor was quick and strange and warm. And it had an energy unlike anything else being made for young audiences. Fact 7. Despite the viral success of the short, the first studio to hold its option was Nickelodeon, and they passed on it. Ward had actually pitched the show to Nickelodeon as a full series, and the network declined. This was not an unusual story in animation development. What followed, however, was the second chapter. Fred Seibert, the founder of Frederator Studios, took the short and brought it to Cartoon Network, where it eventually found a home. The show was formally commissioned for a full series run, and the wheels began to turn. Fact 8. Before Adventure Time began production as a series, but Ward spent a year working on another Cartoon Network show called The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, created by Thurup Van Orman. He worked as a writer and storyboard artist, and the experience was formative in a very specific way. Flapjack operated as a storyboard-driven show, meaning the artist who drew the boards also wrote the episodes themselves, based on a loose outline. There were no separate writing rooms and artist rooms. Everyone contributed to the storytelling. Ward loved this model, and when he returned to develop Adventure Time as a full series, he brought the exact same philosophy with him. The writers of Adventure Time drew. The artists of Adventure Time wrote. It created a unified creative voice that made the show feel like it had been dreamed by a single mind, even when it hadn't. Fact 9. Adventure Time officially premiered as a series on Cartoon Network on April 5, 2010, following a preview screening on March 11, 2010. The show was produced by both Cartoon Network Studios and Frederator Studios, a partnership that gave Ward the resources of a major network while preserving the independent spirit that Frederator had nurtured from the beginning. Almost immediately, the show caught on. Children loved the adventures and the humor. Teenagers and young adults loved the weirdness and the warmth. The show had no demographic ceiling, which confounded the network's marketing teams but delighted everyone else. Fact 10. In an interview with Animation World Network, Ward described his goals for the show's tone in a way that's worth sitting with. He wanted to combine subversive humor with genuinely beautiful moments. Then he cited Hayao Miyazaki's film My Neighbor Totoro as an inspiration for the beautiful side of things. The quiet wonder of a child lying in grass, the sense that the world is full of gentle magic. He also named home movies and Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist, as influences, because those shows felt relaxed and conversational. The dialogue unforced and natural rather than loud and cartoonish. This combination, the strange and the gentle, is exactly what Adventure Time achieved. Fact 11. Pendleton Ward had a long list of creative influences that fed into the show's DNA. He was deeply inspired by The Simpsons, which he watched obsessively as a child, freeze-framing background details and memorizing in-jokes that no one else caught. He was influenced by David Lynch's surreal imagery. He drew from French fantasy comics, particularly a series called Dungeon by Joanne Sfar and Louis Trondheim, which Ward described as a big creative touchstone for the way the show treated its fantasy world with casual matter-of-factness. The characters in Dungeon live in a world of magic and monsters, and they talk about it the way people talk about traffic. Adventure Time does the same thing. Fact 12. One of the most important structural decisions Ward made for the show was also one of the most counterintuitive ones. The show didn't have a hook. When he described Adventure Time to Cartoon Network executives, he couldn't point to a high-concept pitch or a dramatic central conflict. There was no overarching villain introduced in the pilot. There was no ticking clock, no mystery, no dramatic premise driving viewers forward. But there were just two friends, a boy and his magical dog, who lived in a fantasy world and went on adventures. Ward himself acknowledged that this was a genuinely hard sell. When you ask a network to invest millions of dollars into something, they usually want a reason. Adventure Time's reason was simply that it was joyful and strange and alive. Somehow, that was enough. Fact 13. Ward eventually stepped down as showrunner during Season 5, handing the reins to Adam Muto. He later told Rolling Stone in an October 2014 interview that running the show had been driving him, quote, nuts. The demands of coordinating a television series, managing dozens of creative people, handling network notes, solving production problems daily, had taken a toll on what he loved most about making things. And he continued to contribute as a writer and storyboard artist through the end of Season 6, and remained an executive producer all the way through the finale. His fingerprint stayed on the show even after he stepped back, and Muto's thoughtful stewardship kept the spirit intact. Fact 14. The show ran for 10 seasons over 8 years, concluding on September 3, 2018, with a feature-length finale episode called Come Along With Me. The decision to end the show was announced by Cartoon Network in September 2016, giving the writing team approximately 2 years to plan and execute a conclusion. That kind of runway is genuinely rare in animated television, where shows are often canceled without warning or stretched long past their natural ending. The Adventure Time team used that time thoughtfully, allowing them to bring dozens of character arcs to natural conclusions rather than cramming everything into a final episode. Fact 15. The production team for Adventure Time included an unusually high number of creators who went on to build remarkable careers of their own. J.G. Quintel was there before the show even began. Rebecca Sugar, who worked as a storyboard artist and songwriter, later created Steven Universe. Patrick McHale, a creative director on the show, went on to create Over the Garden Wall. Natasha Allegri, a character designer, created Bee and Puppy Cat. Skylar Page, a writer, created Clarence. Justin Roiland, who voiced the Earl of Lemongrab, went on to create Rick and Morty. The list goes on. Adventure Time wasn't just a great show, it was a school, and its alumni changed the shape of animation for years. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Seriously, I love seeing those. Whether you're in a bedroom in the Philippines at 2 in the morning or on a couch in Canada watching with the sound low so you don't wake anyone up, let me know. And if you're enjoying this so far, please consider subscribing to Dozing Off Time. It takes nothing, and it means everything. Section 2. Finn the Human, the last of his kind, and the hero of O. Fact 16. Finn the Human is, as his title suggests, a human boy living in a world where humans are essentially extinct. He was voiced throughout the entire run of the series by Jeremy Shada, who was only 13 years old when the show began. The character was 12 years old at the start of the series, and aged realistically with each passing season in a way that very few animated shows bother to do. By the finale, Finn was roughly 17. Shada's own voice cracked and deepened over the course of the show's run, and the creative team made no effort to disguise this. They let it happen. They let the character grow up. Fact 17. In the original short film, the character that would become Finn was named Penn, as we've already established. But there's a detail that makes his full canonical name even more interesting. His full name, confirmed later in the series, is Finn Mertens. The last name was not arbitrary. Mertens is a Dutch variant of the name Martin, which means warrior. Whether this was always intentional or became intentional after the fact is unclear, but it fits the character perfectly. He is, at his core, not a warrior. Not a cold one, not a cynical one, but a warrior all the same. Someone who runs toward danger because something inside him cannot do otherwise. Fact 18. The mystery of Finn's origins sits at the center of the show's deepest emotional architecture. For years, multiple seasons, he was presented as the last human in Oo. No family, no history, just a boy in a white bear hat who had been found as an infant, alone in the woods, lying on a leaf. He was discovered by Jake's parents, Joshua and Margaret, a pair of talking dog detectives who rescued him from the wilderness, took him home, and raised him as their own. Jack, already born and curious, became his brother. That's the family Finn chose, and that family chose him back. Fact 19. The episode titled Memories of Boom Boom Mountain gives us a brief and heartbreaking image of what Finn's early infancy looked like. A baby, alone in a forest, crying, unable to move because he'd soiled a large leaf and fallen onto it. That image, an infant, helpless and alone in a post-apocalyptic wilderness, sits very differently once you understand the full scope of what that world actually is. Finn didn't just lose his parents. He lost them in one of the most hostile environments imaginable, the aftermath of the end of human civilization. Fact 20. The truth about Finn's biological parents was revealed in the miniseries Islands, which aired in early 2017 as part of Season 8. His mother is a woman named Minerva Campbell, a doctor and scientist who lived on Hub Island, which is one of a cluster of human-inhabited islands far from the mainland of Oo. His father is Martin Mertens, a notorious con man who had spent years running schemes against people and then disappearing before the consequences caught up with him. Martin had tried to go clean for Minerva's sake after Finn was born, but his past didn't stay past. An old victim came looking for revenge. Fact 21. The night it thought everything changed for Finn's family unfolded like this. Minerva was at work. Martin was home alone with baby Finn when a figure from his past broke into their house. Martin grabbed the infant and ran. He didn't know what else to do. He made it to the water and got onto a raft, intending to circle around the island and return. But the giant robotic guardian that protected the island's perimeter, a massive mechanical construct designed to keep monsters out and humans in, detected the raft and attacked. In the chaos that followed, Finn and Martin were separated. The baby was cast adrift on the ocean. Martin vanished. And a few currents later, an infant Finn washed up on the shores of Oo. Fact 22. 2. The human islands themselves are a haunting invention. After the Mushroom War devastated the mainland, a group of human survivors led by a figure known as Two Bread Tom fled Oo on a repurposed container ship. They were escaping vampires, mutants, irradiated wildlife, and the general collapse of everything that had once been familiar. They sailed until they found a chain of islands to the southwest of Oo, and they built a new society there. Over 1,000 years, this society became advanced and functional, but also deeply controlling. Citizens were assigned roles from childhood. Those who wanted to leave were called hiders, and specially trained seekers were sent to bring them back. The island was safe. It was also a gilded cage. Fact 23. Finn's mother Minerva, unable to reach Finn after he vanished, channeled her grief into her work. She became one of the island's most devoted helpers, the term used for doctors and caregivers. When a deadly virus was accidentally released on Hub Island, killing 62% of the population, Minerva made a choice so extreme it's almost hard to process. She uploaded her consciousness into a computer network, becoming an artificial intelligence capable of running hundreds of robotic helper bodies at once, and used this to contain the outbreak and save the survivors. She became both herself and an institution. When Finn found her again, he was meeting something between a mother and a ghost. Fact 24. The reunion between Finn and Minerva in the island's miniseries is one of the most genuinely moving sequences in the entire show. He shows her his memories, a montage of everything he has done and seen and fought for and loved, all the strange and dangerous and beautiful life he has lived in Oo. And she weeps. Not because it isn't wonderful, but because it terrifies her. She had kept humans safe by keeping them contained, and here was her son, the living proof that the outside world could be survived, even glorified. She eventually lets him go. He sails back to Oo. They say goodbye through a VR headset, embracing in a digital space that cannot hold them. Fact 25. Finn's relationship with his biological father Martin is one of the show's more uncomfortable and realistic examinations of parental disappointment. Martin is not a monster. He's something harder to handle than a monster. He's a deeply selfish, charming, irresponsible man who genuinely doesn't seem to feel remorse in the way Finn needs him to. When Finn finally finds Martin and rescues him from a cosmic prison, he discovers that his father has simply re-embraced his con-man ways. Martin uses Finn, then leaves him behind on a doomed space station, and in doing so, Finn loses an arm. The loss of the arm is physical and real. The emotional wound is deeper and slower to close. Fact 26. In one of the most striking sequences of later seasons, Finn encounters what's called a catalyst comet, a recurring cosmic event in the Adventure Time universe tied to reincarnation and transformation. The comet offers Finn a choice: leave Oo entirely, transcend his current existence, become something beyond human. He declines. He chooses to stay in Oo, to remain Finn, to remain himself in the world that raised him. Martin, in contrast, accepts the comet's offer and ascends to some other mode of being. Father and son say goodbye without resolving anything. It's the most honest goodbye the show could have written, because some relationships don't get resolution. They just get endings. Fact 27. Throughout the show's run, Finn carried the Enchiridion, a legendary book described as a handbook for heroes. It was one of the first major objects he and Jake sought out together, and it recurred throughout the series as a symbol of heroism and purpose. The book was eventually destroyed in a dramatic sequence involving the Lich, but its existence established something important about how Finn understood himself. He was always, in some sense, trying to live up to a code, trying to be the kind of person who deserved to carry the book at all. Fact 28. One of Finn's most psychologically revealing episodes is The Vault, in which he discovers that he has lived past lives. The most significant of these is the life of Shoko, a young woman who helped Princess Bubblegum establish the early Candy Kingdom, was mutated by the irradiated river that ran beneath where the castle would eventually be built, and died with unresolved guilt. Finn carries these past lives inside him without being fully aware of them. Now, and their weight shapes his instincts and fears in ways he can't quite name. The revelation that Finn is a soul cycling through history, that he has always been there, in one form or another, bound to the story of Ooh, gives his heroism a weight that feels earned rather than assigned. Fact 29. By the series finale, Finn had grown from a 12-year-old who punched first and asked questions later into something considerably more thoughtful. He'd been in love and had his heart broken. He'd lost his arm and grown it back in strange and magical ways. He'd found his parents and said goodbye to them both. He'd faced the extinction of his species and the end of the world more than once. And through all of it, the core of him held the desire to help, the instinct toward kindness, that the bone-deep certainty that when someone needed saving, you ran toward them. That's what Finn was. That's what he remained. Fact 30. The Adventure Time, Distant Lands, Special Together, again, which aired in 2021 on HBO Max, depicts the afterlife reunion of Finn and Jake. In this special, we learn that Jake died long before Finn did. When Finn eventually dies himself, already old, having lived a full life, he journeys through the multiple layers of the dead worlds to find Jake. Their reunion, when it comes, is quiet and warm and entirely without fanfare. Two old friends finding each other again, they then choose to reincarnate together. It's a gentle ending for two characters who spent a decade being defined by loyalty. In death, as in life, they stayed together. Section 3. Jake the Dog. Stretchy Truths and Lazy Wisdom. Fact 31. Jake the Dog is, at first glance, a straightforward comic foil. A lazy, food-obsessed, lovable dog who happens to have magical shape-shifting powers. He talks, he stretches, he eats sandwiches with philosophical devotion. He is, by his own admission, not particularly interested in glory or danger. But the more you watch Adventure Time, the more Jake reveals himself to be something more nuanced, a man who has genuinely processed his own fears and limitations, and arrived at a kind of contentment that most people spend their whole lives reaching for. Fact 32. Jake is voiced by John DiMaggio, a performer with one of the most recognizable voices in modern animation. DiMaggio is also the voice of Bender Bending Rodriguez in Futurama, a Few Dog in American Dragon, Jake Long and the Scotsman in Samurai Jack. His delivery for Jake has a warm, effortless quality, the sound of a man who's seen a lot and found most of it funny. He gives Jake a gravity that the character's surface cheerfulness could easily have masked. When Jake is sad, which he sometimes is, the weight in DiMaggio's voice is real and immediate. Fact 33. Jake's origins are considerably stranger than they first appear. For most of the series, the official story was that Jake had gotten his stretchy powers by rolling around in a magical mud puddle as a puppy, a throwaway explanation he gave in the episode The Witch's Garden. Pendleton Ward later confirmed in an interview that this story was simply wrong. Jake didn't actually know how he'd gotten his powers. He couldn't remember. That the real answer took years to reveal itself, and it is considerably more unsettling. Fact 34. The true origin of Jake's powers was buried in the episode Joshua and Margaret Investigations. In this episode, which is framed as a detective noir told from the perspective of Jake's parents, Joshua and Margaret were investigating a case when they were attacked by a mysterious blue creature with multiple eyes. The creature bit Joshua on the head. Sometime later, a small dog, Chai, was born from the pustule that grew on the bite site. The shape-shifting creature that attacked Joshua was, effectively, Jake's biological father. Jake was not fully aware of this for most of his life. Fact 35. Later in the series, Jake encountered the creature itself, a cosmic shapeshifter named Warren Ampersand. But this meeting was not a warm homecoming. Ampersand turned out to be manipulative and self-interested, trying to use Jake to extend his own life. Jake handled the encounter with the quiet wisdom that defines his character at his best. He didn't rage at the revelation, didn't collapse under it, but confronted it with open eyes and a steady heart. Coming to terms with the fact that your parent is not who you needed them to be is one of Adventure Time's recurring emotional themes, and Jake lived it just as Finn did, in his own way. Fact 36. Jake and Finn's relationship is the emotional foundation of everything the show builds. They are brothers in every meaningful sense, not by blood, but by shared childhood, shared history, shared loss, shared joy. They argue sometimes. They annoy each other. Jake gives famously questionable advice, and Finn sometimes follows it, and things go wrong, and then they figure it out together. But underneath all of that is a bond that the show never cheapens or complicates beyond what feels true. They love each other. That love is constant. Fact 37. Jake's stretchy powers operate under a specific physical rule. They are subject to the conservation of mass. This means that when Jake stretches to become enormous, he also becomes incredibly thin. And if he stretches too far, he risks dying. His mass spreads so thin across such a distance that his body can no longer sustain itself. This constraint was explored directly in the episode The Limit, where Jake stretches to near-fatal proportions while navigating a dangerous dungeon. A Penn Ward acknowledged in an interview that Jake uses his powers lazily and almost certainly doesn't understand their full potential, which is both a character note and an unexplored narrative possibility the show was always quietly aware of. Fact 38. Jake speaks Korean. Not as a joke, not as an occasional gag. He genuinely speaks the language, fluently, because his girlfriend Lady Rainicorn speaks Korean and essentially only Korean throughout the series. Lady Rainicorn is Princess Bubblegum's best friend and royal steed, a beautiful unicorn rainbow hybrid being voiced by Nikki Yang, who communicates almost exclusively in Korean dialogue that is never subtitled for the characters around her. Only Jake and Princess Bubblegum understand her. This linguistic quirk is a small, just beautiful piece of world building. A magical dog who learned a foreign language because he fell in love with someone who spoke it. Fact 39. Jake and Lady Rainicorn have 5 children together, introduced in the episode Jake the Dad. The children are named Charlie, Jake Jr., Kim Kil-wan, TV, and Viola. Each of them inherited a mixture of their parents' abilities, the shape-shifting of Jake combined with the light manipulation and color-changing powers of Lady Rainicorn. Jake Jr., notably, can form a propeller from her hair, allowing her to fly in ways her siblings can't replicate. The children grow up rapidly and become complex characters in their own right, each representing a different relationship with their unusual inheritance. Fact 40. Jake's philosophy of life. Jake's, while expressed most clearly in moments of apparent laziness, is actually something more intentional than it looks. He is a character who has worked through his youthful criminality. He was a gang leader as a young dog, and consciously chosen a different way to be. He values rest. He values the sandwich. He values sitting with his girlfriend and playing the viola, which is a real instrument that both he and Lady Rainicorn play together. He has a newspaper advice column. He has a genuine domestic life that he protects fiercely. He is not avoiding responsibility. He has simply decided, with clear eyes, what a good life looks like. Fact 41. Jake's death, which occurs off-screen between the main series and the Distant Lands specials, is handled with profound restraint. We never see it. We are simply told through context and implication that Finn outlived Jake by many years. The choice not to dramatize Jake's death was almost certainly deliberate. Some losses are too large for spectacle. You just wake up one day and the person is gone and the world continues, and you carry them with you. Finn carried Jake all the way to his own death and beyond. That's the ending they both deserved. Section 4. The Land of Ooo, a world built on beautiful ruin. Fact 42. The Land of Ooo is, by any reasonable measure, one of the most inventive fictional worlds in the history of animated television. It is simultaneously a candy-colored fantasy playground and a haunted ruin, a place where jellybean people go to parties in the shadow of buried nuclear weapons. Every piece of world-building in Ooo operates on 2 levels. The whimsical surface that delights children and the dark substrate that haunts the adults watching with them. Fact 43. Oo is Earth. Specifically, it is North America, or what North America became after 1,000 years of recovery from a nuclear catastrophe. The show makes this explicit through recurring details: the shape of the landmass visible from space, the technological ruins buried in the ground, the scattered remnants of cars and buildings and government warning labels that no one alive can read anymore. The name Oo itself may derive from the shape of the landscape, a place so radically changed that even naming it required starting over. Fact 44. But one of the most striking visual details about the world of O is visible in early episodes during the opening title sequence. There is a massive chunk missing from the Earth. The planet, viewed from space, has what appears to be a vast crater eating into its surface. This detail was not an accident. It speaks to the scale of whatever happened during the Mushroom War, an event so catastrophic that it literally changed the geometry of the planet. Fact 45. The name Mushroom War refers to nuclear weapons and the characteristic mushroom-shaped cloud produced when they detonate. It is the show's way of encoding the horrifying without saying it aloud. The children watching the show know something bad happened. The adults watching understand exactly what kind of bad. But Ward confirmed that the world of Oo exists in the aftermath of nuclear war, and the simultaneous return of magic to the world. A double transformation that turned the ruins of human civilization into something strange and alive and new. Fact 46. Pendleton Ward has said that the post-apocalyptic nature of Oo was not present in his original concept for the show. It emerged accidentally during the production of the episode Business Time, in which Finn and Jake discover a group of businessmen who have been frozen in an iceberg and are slowly thawing out, perfectly preserved from some earlier era. The writers decided, spontaneously, that these men had survived some catastrophic event, and the whole team, as Ward put it, just ran with it. The history of the world was built backward, not constructed to explain a single ice-encased group of confused office workers. Fact 47. The Candy Kingdom is the most prominent civilization in Oo, and it is arguably the strangest piece of architecture in the show's world. A vast sugar-spun city ruled by a sentient piece of bubblegum, populated by living sweets, built on top of a buried river of radioactive sludge. The castle is pink and towering. The citizens are cheerful and slightly dim. Candy bars walk around and go to parties. Gingerbread men hold public office. And beneath all of it, leaking quietly through the foundation, is the toxic legacy of the world that came before. Fact 48. The tree fort where Finn and Jake live is a genuinely beloved piece of fictional architecture. A massive tree with multiple floors built inside it, and a bedroom and a kitchen and a living room and a secret armory. A flag bearing a skull outside, a ladder that drops down from the front door. The show never quite explains how it came to be, but it has a permanence and specificity that makes it feel like a real place. Fans have mapped it obsessively. The tree itself is alive and ancient, a survivor of whatever devastated the surrounding landscape. Fact 49. The Ice Kingdom sits to the north of Oo, an enormous frozen expanse ruled by the Ice King from his castle of blue-gray permafrost. It is perpetually in blizzard. The penguins, Gunter and his many relatives, live there and waddle around in service of their erratic king. The Ice Kingdom is a place of cold loneliness, and everything about its geography reflects the character at its center. Enormous, frozen, and desperately isolated. Fact 50. The Nightosphere is the show's equivalent byline of Hell, a dimension of fire and chaos ruled by a demon named Hunson Abadir. It is described as being entirely chaotic, populated by demons, and accessible through a portal created by drawing a specific symbol in mustard and reciting a particular incantation. The Nightosphere is Marceline's inheritance, her father's kingdom, a place she has complicated feelings about returning to. It is loud and violent and impossibly strange, and it stands in absolute contrast to the relatively gentle world of Oo. Fact 51. The Dead Worlds, explored most fully in the Distant Lands Special Together Again, form a complex afterlife mythology. There are multiple layers, various planes of post-death existence separated by difficulty of access, all populated by the souls of beings who have passed on. The show treats death not as an ending, but as a transition, a movement into a different kind of existence rather than disappearance into nothing. This cosmology quietly informs the emotional weight of every loss in the show. Nobody in Adventure Time really disappears. Fact 52. Ooh contains dozens of kingdoms and regions, each with its own ruler and culture and bizarre internal logic. There is the Fire Kingdom, ruled by Flame King, where everything burns. There is the Breakfast Kingdom, whose inhabitants are made of morning food. There is the Lumpy Space, a dimension of lumpy purple beings who speak in Valley Girl cadences and take social slights with unusual seriousness. But the show's world building operates not through exhaustive lore documents, but through the texture of casual encounters. The sense that every road in Ooh leads somewhere equally strange and equally specific. Section 5. The Lich, the oldest evil in the universe. Fact 53. The Lich is Adventure Time's primary antagonist, and he is one of the most genuinely frightening villains in modern animated television. He is not frightening because he is loud or dramatic. He is frightening because he is patient, ancient, and philosophically committed to the destruction of all life. He doesn't want to rule, he doesn't want revenge. He wants extinction. He believes that the absence of life is a kind of purity, and he works toward it with the calm certainty of someone who has been working at the same task for a very long time. Fact 54. That the Lich originated from the explosion of the mushroom bomb, the weapon that ended the Great Mushroom War. He was not created by the bomb in the mechanical sense. He was, according to the show's mythology, a being that already existed in a cosmic sense, a force of entropic annihilation that had existed before the universe itself. The bomb provided him with a physical form, a massive skeletal entity made of green decay and dark magic, rising from the crater of the explosion like a nightmare made manifest. Fact 55. One of the most important episodes for understanding the Lich's true nature is The Lich, from Season 4, in which the ancient monster possesses the body of Billy, a legendary hero who Finn had idolized for years. Watching the Lich move through the body of a man Finn trusted, hearing Billy's warm voice say cold, or wrong things with Samaha Babaine, it is one of the show's most deeply uncomfortable sequences, the horror of violation and the collapse of safety. Fact 56. The Lich's voice is provided by Ron Perlman, the actor known for Hellboy and Sons of Anarchy, among many other roles. Perlman gives the character a resonance that makes him feel genuinely ancient, not like a cartoon villain, but like something that has been speaking in the same slow, certain voice since before human civilization began. There is never any humor in how the Lich speaks. He does not taunt or monologue. He simply states what is, and what he intends, with absolute conviction. Fact 57. In the 5th season premiere episodes, Finn gets a wish from Prismo, a cosmic, wish-granting entity who lives at the center of a time room, and uses it to wish that the Lich had never existed. But this wish takes Finn to what's called the Farm World Timeline, an alternate version of Earth where Simon Petrikov stopped the mushroom bomb before it detonated at the cost of his own life. In this world, the Lich was never born. Humanity survived in a less advanced form. Marceline aged into an elderly woman, never having been transformed. But Jake, still alive in this timeline, falls into the radioactive waste that the bomb left behind and becomes a host for the Lich's essence. Even in the world where the Lich never existed, something moved to fill the space he left. Fact 58. The Lich has the ability to control minds, raise the dead, fire blasts of dark magic, and reduce living things to ash with a touch. He has survived being trapped in amber by the hero Billy, having his body shattered, as being reformed as a sweet and harmless baby named Sweet Pea by a wish from Jake, and being reabsorbed into his cosmic origin. He is, in the true sense of the word, unkillable. Not because he regenerates, but because the force he represents is larger than any single body. Fact 59. In the episode Escape from the Citadel, the Lich reaches the cosmic prison called the Crystal Citadel and pours his essence into the progenitor, an enormous entity at the center of all life, transforming into something called Lod, the Lich King of the universe, a being of near infinite scale. The heroes, in desperation, throw the healing blood of the progenitor onto him. This transforms him not into a destroyed monster, but into a harmless amnesiac infant who is immediately adopted by an alien family. It is simultaneously the show's darkest and funniest moment of villain defeat. Ultimate evil humbled not by force but by innocence. Fact 60. The Lich represents something that Adventure Time takes seriously as a philosophical concept. The idea that the universe contains forces that are fundamentally opposed to consciousness, growth, and connection. The show doesn't pretend that darkness is always a misunderstood good. Sometimes darkness is just darkness, but it also insists that darkness has never once, in the entire history of the universe, succeeded in its goal of final extinction. Something always survives. Something always begins again. Section 6. Ice King and Simon Petrikov, the most heartbreaking character in animation. Fact 61. Simon Petrikov was an antiquarian, a specialist in ancient artifacts, who lived in the years before the Mushroom War. He wore glasses and had brown hair and a brown suit. He loved a woman named Betty Groff, whom he called his princess. He was, by all appearances, a gentle and earnest academic with a fondness for old things and a reasonable enough life ahead of him. Then one day, on an expedition to northern Scandinavia, he purchased a jeweled crown from a dockworker at a harbor. He brought it home. He put it on to make Betty laugh. The crown took him. Fact 62. The magic ice crown belongs to a long line of terrible objects in fiction. Artifacts that grant power at the cost of the self, that reshape their wearer from the inside out. What makes the crown in Adventure Time different from, say, a corrupting ring or a cursed weapon? Is the specificity of how it destroys. It doesn't make Simon evil. It makes him confused. It gives him hallucinations and blackouts. It makes him shout things he doesn't remember shouting. It makes him do things he can't explain afterward. He woke up from his first experience of wearing the crown to find Betty gone and no memory of what he'd said or done to drive her away. Fact 63. Simon began recording himself on VHS tapes so that there would be a record, evidence of who he had been before the crown erased him. He was, in essence, making a farewell video for his own mind. The tapes show a frightened, articulate man watching himself disappear in real time. He documents his changing skin, his changing nose, his hair going white, his body temperature dropping below the human norm. He notes that he is aware of what is happening, but feels increasingly unable to stop it. The tapes are among the most genuinely sad artifacts the show ever produced. Fact 64. The Mushroom War began while Simon was still losing himself to the crown. He survived the initial devastation, the crown's magic apparently protecting him from radiation and collapse in ways his human body alone could not have managed. And wandering through the ruins of the world, through collapsed buildings and irradiated streets and the gray silence of the aftermath, he found a small girl. She was crying, alone, sitting near the wreckage of a toy shop. Her name was Marceline Abadir. She was 7 years old. He went into the destroyed shop, found a stuffed toy, and gave it to her. He called it Hambo. Fact 65. Simon raised Marceline in the ruins of the world for several years, during which he used the crown's power to protect them both from monsters and harsh conditions. Every time he used the crown, the corruption crept deeper. He sang her songs. He found them food. He kept her spirits up with bad jokes and genuine warmth, even as the man he had been slipped further and further away. He wrote her a note, a letter that she carried with her for centuries, that she found again in the episode I Remember You, that she had turned into a song. The note says things like, "I don't know how much longer I can keep it together. I need you to know that everything I did to keep you safe." Fact 66. The episode I Remember You is widely considered not just the best episode of Adventure Time, but one of the best episodes of any animated series ever made. In it, the Ice King comes to Marceline because he is lonely and wants to make music with her. She is cold to him at first, as she often is, because the Ice King, even when he is trying, is a burden. But then she finds the old scrapbook pages and she reads the note, and she begins to understand. The Ice King doesn't remember Simon Petrikov. He doesn't remember Marceline. He doesn't remember the ruins or the toy or the years they spent together. But he keeps coming back to her. He always comes back to her. Some part of what he was keeps gravitating toward what he loved, even through 1,000 years of madness. Fact 67. 7. The episode Simon and Marcy, set 996 years before the events of the main series, shows us those years directly. Simon, still mostly himself but visibly deteriorating, carries a young Marceline through a ruined city. He finds a TV in the wreckage, hooks it up to a generator, and plays her an episode of Cheers so that she can experience something normal, something made before the world ended. He sings her the theme song of Cheers, a song about a place where everybody knows your name, while the ice crown glows on his head and the monsters circle outside. It is devastating. It is also exactly the kind of thing a parent does, throws their body between their child and the darkness, and calls it ordinary. Fact 68. The Ice Crown's curse is connected to a much older history revealed in the Season 5 episode Evergreen. Long before Simon, the crown had been created by an ancient ice elemental named Urgence Evergreen, who wanted to use it to stop a comet from destroying the world. He designed the crown to grant the wearer's deepest wish. His apprentice, a tiny dinosaur named Gunter, was the first to wear the crown, and the crown interpreted the apprentice's deepest wish, to be like Evergreen himself, and wrote that wish into the crown permanently. Every subsequent wearer of the crown becomes a copy of Evergreen, cold-powered, lonely, obsessive, gradually losing themselves to the accumulated imprint of the original wearer's madness. Simon Petrikov did not become the Ice King because the crown was evil. He became the Ice King because the crown was listening, and what it heard was the shape of a different man entirely. Fact 69. Betty Groff, Simon's fiancée, did not simply disappear after Simon drove her away with the crown. In the Season 5 episode Betty, a magical accident temporarily restores Simon's sanity. He is himself again, gentle, confused, wearing glasses that no longer look quite right on an ancient face, but he is dying without the crown's magic to sustain him. Betty, who had traveled through time to find him, helps restore his powers, which means watching him slip back into the Ice King. She becomes a wizard dedicated to saving him. She pursues increasingly desperate magical schemes across Season 6 and 7. In the finale, she sacrifices herself by merging with the entity Golby, the embodiment of chaos, in order to make a wish that turns Golby into something less destructive. She becomes Golbetty. She is not destroyed. She is transformed. It is not a happy ending, but it is a real one. Fact 70. In the finale, come along with me, Simon Petrikov is restored. He is himself again, old, bewildered, free of the crown at last. The crown is absorbed by his penguin Gunter, who uses it to become a new entity called the Ice Thing. Simon goes into the future knowing that Betty is gone, that his fiancée of 1,000 years sacrificed herself for him. The aftermath is explored in the spin-off Fiona and Cake, where we find Simon 12 years later, still alive, still struggling, dealing with depression and purposelessness without the magical framework that had defined his existence for a millennium. He is not saved. He is just human again. And the show is honest about how hard that is. Fact 71. Tom Kenny, who voices the Ice King, has spoken in interviews about how much he loves the character. Kenny is also the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants, among dozens of other animated roles. He has described the Ice King as one of the most rewarding characters he has ever played, a villain who slowly revealed himself to be a victim, a figure of ridicule who turned out to be carrying more grief than almost anyone around him. In the original pilot short, the character was voiced by John Kassir, best known as the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt. Kenny took over for the series and made the role entirely his own. Section 7. Marceline the Vampire Queen. 1,000 years of making it work. Fact 72. Marceline Abadir is over 1,000 years old and looks about 20. She has bone-white skin, long black hair that falls to her ankles, and 2 bite marks on her neck. She floats rather than walks. She plays an electric bass guitar that she made from her family's battle axe. Now, she is the daughter of the demon lord of the Nightosphere and a human woman named Elise. She is one of the most fully realized characters in the show, not despite her contradictions, but because of them. She is ancient and juvenile, fierce and tender, terrifying and desperately lonely. Fact 73. Marceline was born a half-demon in a world that was still mostly human. Her mother Elise was human, voiced in flashback by Rebecca Sugar, who created Steven Universe. Her father, Hunson Abadir, is the ruler of an infernal dimension, voiced by Martin Olson, who is, in real life, the father of Olivia Olson, Marceline's voice actress. The casting of a real father as the demon father of the character, voiced by his own daughter, is a choice that adds something ineffable to the performance every time their scenes appear. When Marceline sings about her father eating her fries and it not being about the fries, you feel it differently knowing who's in the recording booth. Fact 74. Marceline doesn't drink blood. This is one of the show's most quietly original choices about vampire mythology. She sustains herself on the color red. Not the liquid, not the life force, specifically the color. She takes the red out of strawberries and leaves them gray. She takes the red out of roses. She once accidentally took the red out of Princess Bubblegum, which raised its own set of questions. If deprived of red for too long, she enters a feral state and her older, darker instincts override her personality. It is a compelling metaphor, though the show doesn't press the metaphor. It simply states the fact and moves on, the way Oo does with most of its strangeness. By fact 75, Marceline became a vampire while in her early teenage years in the aftermath of the Mushroom War. After Simon left her, as he had to, because what he was becoming frightened him, and he loved her too much to let it hurt her. Marceline spent years alone and then years with her demon father, a relationship strained by the fact that Hunson Abadir is constitutionally incapable of basic emotional attunement. He ate her fries in a ruined diner. That was the breaking point. The emotional reality of the fry song, she came home and he'd eaten the fries she'd been saving, is somehow the most heartbreaking thing the show ever put into music, precisely because of how small it is. It wasn't the fries, it was the 1,000th time he didn't try fact 76. Marceline spent years after leaving her father hunting the vampires that had taken over much of the recovering post-war world, protecting the scattered human tribes who survived. She discovered that she could absorb the powers of vampires she killed, each one granting her a new ability: levitation, invisibility, shape-shifting into bats of various sizes, pyrokinesis. She was building herself into something capable of protecting what was left. Then she fought the vampire king, the most powerful of them, and killed him. But he bit her in the process. She became a vampire in the moment of killing the last one. She became the vampire queen, the final chapter of a species she had spent years destroying. Fact 77. Marceline and Princess Bubblegum had a romantic history that the show spent years hinting at before confirming. But the episode What Was Missing in Season 3 is where the subtext became impossible to ignore. Bubblegum's most prized possession was a t-shirt that Marceline had thrown to her from a concert stage years earlier, during a period when they were close. Marceline, who hadn't known Bubblegum kept it, sang a song about things she needed and whether she still mattered. The show's crew later walked back some of the framing of this episode under network pressure, which became its own story. The relationship was eventually confirmed off-screen by voice actress Olivia Olson, and then confirmed on-screen in the series finale. Fact 78. In the finale, Marceline and Princess Bubblegum kiss. It is brief and real and entirely earned by 8 seasons of quiet history. The spin-off Distant Lands episode Obsidian expands on their relationship, showing how they met. Marceline throwing Bubblegum her shirt from a concert stage, how they fell together, how they separated over a disagreement during a crisis, and how they found their way back. It was nominated for a Gilad Media Award for Outstanding Kids and Family Programming. The show made this relationship matter not by announcing it, but by treating it with the same patient, unhurried depth it gave to every other significant relationship in Oo. Fact 79. Marceline's bass guitar is made from her father's battle axe. This detail, confirmed across multiple episodes, is the show in miniature. Violence transformed into art, inheritance repurposed into expression. the demon's weapon wielded for music instead of harm. She plays it constantly. She writes her own songs. But her music is one of the show's most consistent elements of beauty, and the recordings have a lo-fi warmth that makes them feel like things she made alone, for herself, the way people make music when no one is watching. Fact 80. The Stakes miniseries, which aired as part of Season 7, explored a specific chapter of Marceline's past in detail, showing her vampire hunting years and her eventual transformation. It also showed something else, her genuine ambivalence about immortality. She tried in that miniseries to have her vampirism removed. She succeeded temporarily. She became mortal again, a half-demon who would age. And for a brief time, she chose that. Then the vampires she'd absorbed came back, their essences freed. She had to hunt them all again. And when she finished, and when the last one was gone and she'd been bitten by the Vampire King a second time, she made a different peace with it. She chose immortality, knowingly, with clear eyes, because it meant she could stay with Bubblegum. That's not a compromise, that's love. Section 8, Princess Bubblegum, Architect of Everything. Fact 81. Princess Bonnibel Bubblegum, Bonnie P.B. Peebles, is one of the most intellectually complex characters in the show, and possibly the most genuinely frightening one. She is kind. She is brilliant. She cares, deeply and genuinely, about the candy people she rules over. She also surveils them. She implants them with tracking chips. She makes them cognitively simpler to render them more manageable. She builds private armies and then dismantles them when they become too violent. Then she has been ruling for over 800 years, and she has developed the habits of someone who has been in charge for so long that the line between protection and control has blurred almost beyond recognition. Fact 82. Princess Bubblegum was not born. She emerged. Specifically, she emerged from an entity called the Mother Gum, a vast, mindless, pink bubblegum-like biomass that formed in the years following the Mushroom War. The Mother Gum was not conscious. It was biological material that spread through the ruins of the old world, feeding on whatever the fallout left behind, slowly developing complexity. At some point, two distinct entities separated from it and began to develop independent consciousness. One was Bonnibel. The other was Nettie. Fact 83. Nettie is Princess Bubblegum's brother, and he is one of the show's most quietly devastating characters. He hatched into the world and immediately landed on a sharp rock, and the pain was so profound, so immediate, so total, that he has spent every moment since retreating from sensation. He lives in the basement of the Candy Castle, sucking on the roots of the central candy tree, producing a life-sustaining juice that powers the entire kingdom. He is, functionally, the living engine of the Candy Kingdom, locked in a dark room by choice, too terrified of the world to face it. Bubblegum has built her entire civilization around her brother's trauma. Fact 84. Bubblegum's first creation was a man she called Uncle Gumbald. She made him because she was lonely, because she wanted family, because she was a child who had never had anyone and didn't know how to be alone. And she built him out of candy and her own substance and gave him consciousness. Gumbald had ambitions. He wanted to build a city. Bubblegum wanted something smaller, warmer, more intimate. When she resisted his larger plans, he tried to dose her food with a substance called the dum-dum juice, a concoction that would reduce her to simple-mindedness, render her compliant and content and empty. She discovered the plan, deflected it, and the juice hit Gumbald instead. He became Punchy, a sweet and confused bowl of fruit punch who remembered nothing. Fact 85. Bubblegum's response to Gumbald's betrayal was to build the Candy Kingdom anyway, to do it herself, to create the Candy People, dozens and then hundreds and then thousands of citizens, and rule them with a benevolence that was always slightly, as shadowed by the memory of what family tried to do to her when she trusted it. She called herself princess, and she meant it in every sense: sovereign, solitary, responsible. She never took the title of queen, though she earned it by any measure. The show's commentary on her is not that she is wrong. It's that being right for a very long time can turn into something else. Fact 86. Princess Bubblegum is the incarnation of the candy elemental, one of 4 classical elements in the Adventure Time universe, alongside fire, slime, and ice. Each element has a living embodiment who carries the power of that element in their being. Bubblegum's elemental powers were dormant for most of the series, emerging fully in the Season 7 miniseries Elements, where she was consumed by her own elemental nature and began transforming everything and everyone around her into candy. In this state, she was not malicious, but she was uncontrollable. Her love curdled into something totalizing and suffocating. The episode was, among other things, about what happens when protection becomes possession. Fact 87. Princess Bubblegum lost an election in the Season 6 finale, Hot Diggity Doom, to a con artist named the King of Ooh, who ran on a platform of giving people what they wanted without asking anything in return. The candy people voted him in, overwhelmingly. Bubblegum analyzed the loss afterward and concluded that she had, over centuries, made her citizens too intellectually limited to make good decisions. She had been protecting them so completely that they had never had to develop judgment. It is one of the show's most unflinching examinations of the costs of benevolent authoritarianism. She had kept them safe from everything except their own choices. Fact 88. Bubblegum is fluent in German and Korean. She communicates with Lady Rainicorn in Korean, uses scientific vocabulary across half a dozen disciplines, has invented a miniature time machine, a remote-controlled army of gumball guardian robots, various medical and biological technologies, and at least one fully conscious artificial intelligence. Her intelligence is not a background trait. It is the show's primary explanation for why a bubblegum entity who emerged from radioactive ruins controls the most stable civilization in a post-apocalyptic world. She built it herself, one formula at a time. Fact 89. By the end of the series, Bubblegum had become somewhat less controlled and somewhat more free. Her relationship with Marceline had returned, which gave her something outside of governance, something that wasn't about ruling or protecting or managing. The epilogue of the finale shows them together, traveling, not ruling for once. Just going somewhere together, the way people do when they have finally decided that the world can hold itself for a while without them. Section 9. Hidden Depths. Easter eggs, adult themes, and crew secrets. Fact 90. Every single episode of Adventure Time contains a hidden snail. This is one of the show's most beloved and persistent Easter eggs. Somewhere in every frame of every episode, if you look carefully enough, there is a small cartoon snail, usually waving to the camera. The tradition was established early and maintained rigorously across hundreds of episodes. The snail also played a larger story role at one point, when the Lich used the small creature as a vessel to move through Ooh undetected, meaning the funny background character turned out to be an inadvertent horror element. Fact 91. The snail Easter egg was carried into official Adventure Time merchandise, including the Card Wars tabletop game produced by the show. Several cards in the game feature a hidden snail illustration, and at least one card instructs players to immediately level up if they can find a snail hidden anywhere on the table within 10 seconds. The Easter egg escaped the show entirely and became an interactive tradition. Fact 92. Adventure Time has a runic code used as background text throughout the show. The code uses a traditional runic alphabet similar to historical Elder Futhark runes, with some additions. Fans who decoded it found short messages written on props, backgrounds, and signs throughout episodes. One early example, a message written on a picture in the episode Videomakers, decoded by fans as a complete phrase. A staff in the forest wizard's hands, if the image is horizontally flipped, reads the word face. These little secret messages weren't important to the plot. They were the animators playing. Fact 93. The show contained a remarkable number of adult themes encoded in language and metaphor that children might not recognize but adults would feel. The episode Jake the Dad deals with postpartum anxiety in an honest and specific way. But The Arc of the Ice King is a sustained examination of the grief and disorientation of dementia, the loss of the self to cognitive deterioration, the helplessness of those who loved the person before. The show never called these things by their adult names. It didn't need to. Fact 94. Finn's relationship arc with Flame Princess was explicitly designed to examine young teenage romance with honesty. He did things wrong. He lied to her. He staged a fight between her and Princess Bubblegum out of self-interest, and when she found out, she ended the relationship. The show did not pretend she was wrong to do so. It let Finn sit with his mistake and grow from it without being immediately forgiven. This kind of consequence, emotional, relational, unresolved, is extremely rare in children's animation. Fact 95. Eye to the episode Breezy from Season 6 deals more explicitly with Finn's emotional state following the loss of his arm and the end of his relationship with Flame Princess. It is widely understood to be a metaphor for depression, a character who has lost their ability to feel and is searching for something to reconnect them to vitality. The imagery is surreal and floral, but the emotional territory is recognizable to anyone who has been through a long period of numbness. The episode ends with something being restored, but the restoration is earned rather than miraculous. Fact 96. The show dealt with suicide. Indirectly, carefully, but real. The Season 4 episode I Remember You contains the line in Ice King's found letter about not knowing how much longer he can keep it together. Entire arcs about characters feeling trapped in their circumstances, unable to be what the people they love need them to be, carry the weight of that kind of despair without ever using the word. The show trusted its audience to feel the weight of those moments. Fact 97. The Marceline Bubblegum relationship controversy of Season 3 became a significant moment in the history of animated representation. The episode What Was Missing created in the fandom an immediate and certain sense that the two characters had a past romantic relationship. A video made by the show's promotional team apparently confirmed this reading, and then the video was removed, and a writer involved in it was briefly let go. The situation was murky and handled poorly on multiple levels. But the fandom held onto the relationship, held it carefully, and waited. Until the show's creators confirmed it years later and wrote it into the finale. Fact 98. Justin Roiland, the co-creator of Rick and Morty, played the Earl of Lemongrab on Adventure Time. Lemongrab is one of the show's most memorable recurring characters, a twitching, screaming, deeply unpleasant lemon-headed man who was Princess Bubblegum's first creation and her greatest failure. He is neurologically atypical, emotionally dysregulated, incapable of governing himself, much less others. His screaming rendition of the phrase unacceptable became a cultural touchstone. Roiland's performance, pitched somewhere between anguish and absurdity, is genuinely one of the funniest and most discomforting performances in the show. Fact 99. Marceline's voice actress Olivia Olson, who first gained fame as the child who sang All I Want for Christmas Is You in the movie Love Actually, was specifically sought out by Pendleton Ward for the role. He had seen her in Phineas and Ferb, where she voiced Vanessa Doofenshmirtz, and felt her voice had exactly the right combination of cool detachment and genuine feeling. He was right. Olsen is the show's best singer by considerable distance, and her performances of Marceline's original songs, It's a Sad Song with Good Timing, Slow Dance with You, Woke Up, I Remember You, are among the most memorable moments in the show. Fact 100. The Lich's original voice in the animated short is notably different from Ron Perlman's interpretation in the series. In the pilot short, the character functions as a more straightforward fantasy villain. Should the decision to cast Perlman and to reframe the character as a patient, ancient, cosmically nihilistic force was made during the development of the series, and it transformed the character entirely. Perlman later said in interviews that he was drawn to the role because of how different the Lich was from conventional cartoon villains. Not performative, not theatrical, just absolutely committed. Section 10. The finale, the spin-offs, and what Adventure Time left behind. Fact 101. The finale of Adventure Time, Come Along With Me, aired on September 3, 2018, as a 44-minute special. It was written and storyboarded by a team that included Tom Herpich, Steve Wolfhard, Seo Kim, Somvale Xiophone, Hannah K. Nystrom, Alex Senwald, Sam Alden, and Graham Falk. The story was developed by Herpich, Wolfhard, showrunner Adam Mudo, head writer Ken Osborne, and series creator Pendleton Ward. Former head background designer Ghost Shrimp returned specifically for the finale, having officially left the show during Season 4. Fact 102. The finale is structured in part as a history being told in the future. The framing device shows two citizens of a future Ooh recounting what happened during the Great Gum War, a conflict between Princess Bubblegum's Candy Kingdom and the forces of her Uncle Gumbold. The use of this framing device allows the show to both tell the present story and suggest that it has already become legend, that what we are watching has passed into the history of this world and been preserved. Fact 103. But the Great Gum War is resolved not through conventional heroism, but through a moment of profound clarity. On the verge of a catastrophic battle, Finn and Jake discover that what they are about to fight over is not worth the cost. Gumbold is prepared to deploy a weapon that would destroy everything. Betty, trying to cure Simon by summoning GOLB, inadvertently brings the entity to Ooh. The threat to everything refocuses everyone. Former enemies fight side by side. The resolution of the show's decade-long conflicts happens not through the triumph of good over evil, but through the shared recognition that the fighting has to stop. Fact 104. Golby, the entity summoned in the finale, is the embodiment of pure chaos, the opposite of the organizing principle of the universe. Wherever Golb goes, things revert to their essential states, stripped of any additional complexity. Inside Golb, Ice King becomes Simon again. Betty becomes simply Betty again. Finn loses his robotic arm, reacquired through adventure, and is left with only the stump. Fern, the grass entity grown from Finn's discarded grass sword, cannot survive inside Golb. He is made of complexity, of contradiction, and chaos has no room for him. Fact 105. Fern's death in the finale is one of the most genuinely moving moments in the show's final hours. Fern was, in essence, a version of Finn, born from the same source, shaped by the same experiences, but different in the way that a shadow is different from the person who casts it. He had spent much of his existence struggling with the fact that he was not Finn, that he could never be Finn, that he existed in a kind of ontological limbo. His death, in which he dissolves back into the grass and leaves behind a single sapling from the tree where Finn and Jake grew up, is both an ending and a kind of return. Fact 106. The epilogue of Come Along With Me shows the land of Ooh at some point in a distant future, peaceful and changed. Finn and Jake are away somewhere. The Candy Kingdom is quiet. Marceline and Princess Bubblegum are traveling together. Simon Petrikov is alive, free of the crown, beginning a new chapter of an impossibly long life. The epilogue does not tell us that everything is fine. It tells us that things continue. It tells us that the world goes on making itself, and that is enough. Fact 107. The first Adventure Time spin-off series was Adventure Time: Distant Lands, a 4-hour-long specials released on HBO Max beginning in June 2020. The specials told stories set in parts of the Adventure Time universe that the original series hadn't fully explored. BMO's Journey to Space in the first special, a BMO-centric adventure that reveals the history of the Moco factory. Obsidian, which explored the full history of Marceline and Princess Bubblegum's relationship. Together Again, the afterlife reunion of Finn and Jake, and Wizard City, a Peppermint Butler-focused story set in a magical school. Fact 108. BMO's special in Distant Lands established a connection to the original show through the character Mo, the elderly human creator of BMO and the other MO units. Mo appeared in Season 5 of the original series as a nearly dead cyborg running a decrepit factory in the Badlands. In BMO's special, we learn that Mo had blueprints for a Mars colony on his desk, a detail that had been there all along for anyone who went back to look. The MO factory rocket that launches BMO into space in the special comes directly from those plans. Fact 109. The second spin-off, Adventure Time: Fiona and Cake, premiered on HBO Max on August 31st, 2023. It was developed with a young adult demographic in mind, specifically older than the original show's core audience, and received a TV-14 rating, compared to the original show's TV-PG. The series featured blood, profanity, and substance abuse references that would never have appeared in the original, while retaining the emotional texture and character depth of its parent show. Fact 110. The characters of Fiona and Cake began as fan fiction written by the Ice King. Within the show's story, Ice King wrote gender-swapped versions of the people in his life. Finn became Fiona, Jake became Cake, Marceline became Marshall Lee, Princess Bubblegum became Prince Gumball, and told these stories as a way of inhabiting a fantasy he could live in when reality was too difficult. The show explored this framing in increasing depth, eventually revealing in Fiona and Cake that these characters exist in an actual parallel universe that had somehow been held inside Ice King's mind. Fact 111. The character designs for Fiona and Cake originated with Natasha Allegri, a character designer and storyboard revisionist who posted gender-swapped versions of the Adventure Time cast to her social media accounts during the show's early seasons. Now, the fan response was so enthusiastic that the production team decided to bring the characters into the show formally. Allegri wrote and illustrated early Fiona and Cake comic books published by Boom Studios, which helped establish the characters' personalities before their animated appearances. It is one of the most direct paths from fan enthusiasm to official canon in animation history. Fact 112. Adventure Time, Fiona and Cake, features Simon Petrikov as a central character, exploring his life 12 years after the events of Come Along With Me. He is free of the crown, elderly, human, living alone, and deeply depressed. The world that had given his existence meaning, the Ice Kingdom, the role of the Ice King, even the simple certainty of who he was, is gone. He is rich with history and bereft of purpose. His arc in the series is about learning to live as Simon again, not as a hero, not as a villain, just as a man in a world that has moved on from what he was. Tom Kenny's performance across this material is some of the finest voice work in the franchise. Fact 113. A second season of Fiona and Cake premiered on October 23, 2025 on HBO Max, with new episodes releasing weekly through December 25th of that year. The second season continued the multiverse-hopping format of the first while deepening the emotional stakes for all three central characters. The broader franchise continued to grow, with an Adventure Time movie announced in development at the 2024 Annecy International Animation Film Festival, with Rebecca Sugar, Adam Muto, and Patrick McHale all involved in the project. Fact 114. The influence of Adventure Time on subsequent animated series is difficult to overstate. The generation of shows that followed it, Steven Universe, Over the Garden Wall, Gravity Falls, and many others, all shared with it a willingness to take emotional and narrative risks that earlier children's animation had avoided. These shows trusted their audiences. They let characters be wrong and know it. They let loss be real. They made mythology out of small moments and small moments out of mythology. They learned this, at least in part, from Adventure Time. Fact 115. One of the show's most consistent subtle details across its entire run was the presence of pre-war technology buried in the landscape. Cars half-submerged in fields, the ruins of buildings visible through hills and underbrush, government copyright warnings from before the apocalypse that no one alive understands. These details were Ward's way of honoring the gravity of what the world of Ooh had been through without belaboring the point. They are the ghost of a civilization, present in peripheral vision, never quite foregrounded. Sections 11 through final, expanding the universe. Additional facts across every corner of Ooh. Fact 116. BMO is a sentient video game console who lives with Finn and Jake in the Tree Fort and serves as one of the show's most beloved secondary characters. BMO was created by a human inventor named Mo, who built the MO line of artificial intelligences in the years before the Mushroom War. BMO is voiced by Nikki Yang, who also voices Lady Rainicorn. The character was designed with a deliberately ambiguous gender. BMO uses different pronouns in different episodes, and the show never establishes a definitive answer. BMO simply is. Fact 117. BMO's inner life is vast and strange. In the episode BMO Noir, BMO solves a crime by imagining themselves as a 1940s detective, complete with internal monologue and shadowy aesthetics, in a sequence that is entirely inside BMO's own imagination. In football, BMO creates a separate persona in their own reflection, an entity they call football, who briefly escapes into the real world. BMO dreams. BMO plays. BMO takes baths and hosts imaginary tea parties. BMO is, in many ways, the show's clearest expression of the idea that consciousness doesn't require a body shaped in any particular way. Fact 118. Gunter, the Ice King's primary penguin, is not actually a penguin. This is revealed in the Season 6 finale, where Gunter is revealed to be Orgolorg, an ancient cosmic entity, a planet-crushing being of enormous destructive power who was depowered millennia ago, compacted into the form of a penguin, and sent to live on Earth with no memory of what they had been. Gunter had been waddling around serving the Ice King, wearing a small witch hat on occasion, and dreaming, apparently, of reclaiming their former glory. The reveal of Orgolorg is completely absurd and entirely in keeping with the show's deepest belief, that anything, no matter how small and fluffy, might be concealing something vast. Fact 119. Peppermint Butler is one of the show's great slow reveals. He begins as Princess Bubblegum's cheerful and efficient personal assistant, a small candy person with a peppermint swirl pattern. Over the seasons, it becomes increasingly clear that Peppermint Butler knows things he shouldn't, practices dark magic, has extensive contacts in the underworld, and is held in genuine fear by entities far more powerful than himself. By the distant land's special wizard city, he is a student at a magical school, trying to rebuild his power, navigating a murder mystery, and being considerably more competent and morally complicated than anyone around him. He is, in miniature, the show's reminder that everyone has more going on than they show. Fact 120. The Earl of Lemongrab, created by Princess Bubblegum from her own genetic material as an heir, was the first of her created beings to refuse her authority. He was not evil. He was simply wrong, in almost every dimension, for the responsibilities he'd been given. He governed by screaming. He sent everyone to the dungeon. He ate a smaller version of himself that Bubblegum had created out of loneliness. He eventually dissolved into something approaching peace at the end of his arc, but not before the show had used him to examine what happens when the creator cannot undo the creation. Bubblegum made him. She could not fix him. She had to live with what she had made. Fact 121. Prismo, the entity who lives in the time room and grants wishes, is one of the show's most quietly philosophical characters. He is essentially omniscient within his domain and deeply lonely. He becomes friends with Jake during the Farm World arc, and the friendship is genuine and warm. He cannot leave the time room without ceasing to exist. He is an infinite being trapped in a specific place, and he fills the specificity with as much joy as he can manage, playing video games, making pickles, talking to visitors. Prismo is the show's clearest argument that meaning can be found in constraint rather than in spite of it. Fact 122. Magic Man is one of the show's most fascinating recurring antagonists, a Martian wizard who does terrible things to people seemingly at random, disrupting their lives, transmuting them, humiliating them, and then disappearing. Over the course of the show, it is gradually revealed that Magic Man's cruelty is the product of a grief so total that it shattered his moral coherence. He lost his wife Margles, who was absorbed into GOLB. He built a simulation of her. He destroyed himself trying to contain the loss. His behavior is not justified by this history, but it is understood by it. In the end, his brother Grob Gob Glob Grod, four-faced god king of Mars, restores him. He becomes normal man, briefly, and then something else entirely. Fact 123. The Flame Princess, formerly Phoebe, later Flame Queen, is one of the show's most effective explorations of a character managing a dangerous nature. She is the daughter of the Flame King, who had her imprisoned in a lantern as an infant because she was too powerful and he feared her. She grew up contained, then met Finn, and then burned his house down, then understood what she was and what she needed, and eventually became the Flame Queen, ruling her kingdom with a directness and a moral clarity that her father never possessed. Her journey from imprisoned child to independent ruler is the show's most straightforward coming-of-age story, and it is entirely her own. Fact 124. Susan Strong was introduced in Season 2 as an apparently feral woman leading a tribe of fish people beneath Ooh. She seemed to be the other human Finn had been dreaming of finding, someone like him. Over seasons, it was revealed that she was actually a human from the islands named Kara, who had been modified by Dr. Gross, a scientist on Hub Island who had experimented on seekers to make them better hunters and sent to Oo to track Finn and Martin. The modifications had altered her memories. She was not feral. She was reconstructed. In the Islands miniseries, she recovers her true identity and leaves Oo with her old friend Frida to explore the world on her own terms. Fact 125. Patient Street Pym, the ice elemental who predates the Mushroom War, is one of the show's most quietly tragic figures. She froze herself in a glacier as the war began, intending to emerge when the world had recovered and magic had returned strongly enough for the elementals to achieve their potential. She slept for 1,000 years. When she woke up, the world was very different from what she'd expected, and her plan to unlock the elemental's power went catastrophically wrong, spreading elemental transformations across all of Oo rather than elevating specific beings. She had planned for 1,000 years, and the plan failed. The show doesn't mock her for this. It mourns. Fact 126. The show's music was composed largely by Casey James Basikis, who had worked with Pendleton Ward on short films for Frederator even before Adventure Time was a series. The main theme was written by Ward himself and performed in a warm, deliberately rough manner. Not polished, not triumphant, just energetic and slightly off-center. The right sound for a show about adventure in a broken world. The end credits theme, Bacon Pancakes, became independently famous. The music Rebecca Sugar wrote for the show, including I Remember You and Everything Stays, elevated the show's emotional register considerably and helped it establish the template for the kind of musically sophisticated storytelling that Steven Universe would take even further. Fact 127. Adventure Time's storyboard artists had unusual latitude in creating episodes. The show's format, short 11-minute episodes, allowed individual artists to develop complete stories from outline to finished boards with relatively minimal interference. This meant that the show had a kind of aesthetic variety across its run that most TV animation doesn't achieve. Episodes looked and felt different from one another, each carrying the sensibility of the team that made it. The consistency was in the world, the characters, the emotional logic. The expression varied. Fact 128. Half the show's dialogue was frequently improvised or rewritten in the recording booth. The cast recorded together rather than separately, which is unusual in animation, and the resulting dialogue had a naturalistic overlap and rhythm that Ward had always admired in shows like Dr. Katz. Voice actors riffed. Jokes were added. Lines were cut because they weren't well landing. The production treated the recording session as a genuine performance rather than a technical step. Fact 129. Tom Kenny, Hynden Walsh, John DiMaggio, and Nikki Yang all remained with the show from the first episode through the finale. The consistency of the core cast gave the show a continuity that mattered enormously as the characters deepened and aged. When Finn's voice cracked, when Jake's wisdom deepened, but when the Ice King's sadness became more present, these changes happened in the actual performances, not just on the page. Fact 130. The show eventually generated a vast body of supplementary material, including multiple comic book series published by Boom Studios, novels, encyclopedias, card games, video games, and official merchandise. The Adventure Time Encyclopedia, written by Martin Olson. Olivia Olson's father, the voice of Hunson Abadir, expanded the world's mythology beyond the show itself. The Enchiridion and Marcy's super-secret scrapbook, co-written by Martin and Olivia Olson, offered an intimate look at Marceline's internal life through fictional journaling. Fact 131. The Dungeon Train episode from Season 5 that features a flash-forward to an aged Jake in a specific and melancholy context. He has been riding the Dungeon Train indefinitely, fighting enemies, collecting loot, alone and happy in a shallow way. The older Jake we glimpse there is not a future that comes true, but it functions as a warning. A picture of what Jake's laziness and his resistance to growth could eventually produce if he let himself be entirely comfortable. The show used these flash-forwards carefully, not as predictions, but as possibilities. Fact 132. The show's visual language changed noticeably between seasons, reflecting both the maturing themes and the influence of new artists joining the production. Early seasons have a particular pastel softness, Later seasons are darker in palette and more geometrically complex in design. Thus, the backgrounds in particular became increasingly rich and detailed, the environment of Ooh filling out with more specificity than it had in the beginning. Ghost Shrimp, the background designer whose return to the finale was noted, had established a visual standard in early seasons that his successors maintained and built upon. Fact 133. Adventure Time featured an enormous number of guest voice actors across its run. Lena Dunham voiced Betty Groff. Donald Glover appeared as a guest artist. Andy Milonakis and Melinda Hill both did voices at Ward's invitation. He'd met them on social media and liked their sensibility. Kumail Nanjiani voiced Prismo in the original series, with a different actor taking the role in later spin-offs. Neil Patrick Harris voiced one of Jake and Lady's children. But the show attracted talent from across comedy, drama, and music because its reputation for doing interesting things with character was well established. Fact 134. Pendleton Ward came back, after his period of creative distance from the show, to be part of the development team for the finale. His involvement in the culminating arc of Adventure Time, the arc he had set in motion with a 7-minute short film 2 decades earlier, felt fitting. Ward also served as a creator alongside Rebecca Sugar, Patrick McHale, and Ian Jones-Cordy on The Elephant, a TV special for Adult Swim that premiered on December 19, 2025. The connection between the first generation of Adventure Time collaborators continues to generate work long after the show itself ended. Fact 135. The Adventure Time movie, announced at Annecy in 2024, represents the franchise's first feature-length theatrical project. Details about the story have been carefully guarded, but the involvement of Sugar, Muto, and McHale suggests it will carry the same emotional ambition that characterized the show at its best. The movie faces a specific challenge that Muto acknowledged publicly. The lore of the show is so dense that it cannot simply be a first-watch experience. It will need to hold its own. Fact 136. The show's treatment of death is one of its most philosophically consistent features. In Adventure Time, death is real and it matters. Characters die and stay dead, at least within their original form. But the afterlife is also real and populated and accessible. This cosmology means that loss has weight without being absolute. That grief is appropriate without being final. The show refuses to make death comfortable, but it also refuses to make it a wall. It is a door. What's on the other side is uncertain, complex, and sometimes beautiful. Fact 137. One of the show's most touching recurring elements is the relationship between Finn and the various princesses of Ooh. In early seasons, this reads as a simple, heroic premise. Finn rescues princesses, the Ice King kidnaps them, repeat. But the show complicates the structure constantly. The princesses are not passive. Breakfast Princess carries a weapon. Wildberry Princess has her own political agenda. Princess Bubblegum sometimes needs rescuing from things that sword fighting doesn't help with. Flame Princess eventually doesn't need rescuing at all. But the show repeatedly dismantled the trope it initially appeared to be built on. Fact 138. Lumpy Space Princess, voiced by Pendleton Ward himself in a Valley Girl register that he apparently improvised in the recording booth, is the show's great comedic wildcard. She is dramatic, self-centered, deeply committed to her own narrative, and completely unable to perceive how her behavior affects others. She also has her own extraordinary competence in extreme situations, as demonstrated in the Elements miniseries, where her immunity to elemental transformation saves all of Ooh. LSP is unexpectedly the hero the show needed for its penultimate crisis. The show found this deeply funny. Fact 139. The character Shoko, one of Finn's past lives introduced while in the vault, is remarkable for how fully formed she is in a single episode. She was a thief hired by a witch to steal from the early Candy Kingdom, who befriended Princess Bubblegum anyway and ultimately died protecting her. Her body was left in the irradiated river under the castle, and her spirit lingered for centuries, haunting the place where she failed at being a good before she could quite get there. Her resolution, finding peace through Finn's recognition of her, is the show at its most quietly redemptive. Fact 140. The show repeatedly examined the cost of heroism in specific physical terms. Finn lost his arm and regrew it twice. Jake stretched himself to near death. Princess Bubblegum was reduced to a 13-year-old by a poorly executed resurrection. Heroes in Adventure Time don't come through crises unchanged. That they carry the physical evidence of what they've been through, and the show shows those marks with honesty rather than erasing them for the next episode's convenience. Fact 141. The episode Holly Jolly Secrets, the two-part Christmas special of Season 3, is the episode that changed the show's trajectory more than any other. It introduced Simon Petrikov's videotapes. It showed a gentle, frightened man recording himself into oblivion. Up until that point, the Ice King had been an amusing and somewhat pathetic villain. After that episode, he was something entirely different. The show had been a cheerful fantasy adventure. After that episode, it was also a tragedy. Fact 142. Cartoon Network initially struggled to categorize Adventure Time for marketing purposes, as it didn't fit the standard demographic templates. It was too complex for very young children, too strange for conventional preteen programming, and too sweet-natured for the teenage edge that Adult Swim offered. An anonymous network staffer quoted in IndieWire described the show as something the network didn't have a model for. The show outgrew every box it was put into, and the network eventually learned to simply put it on the air and let the audience find it. Fact 143. The show won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Short-Format Animated Program multiple times across its run, and received numerous Annie Award nominations, the animation industry's own internal recognition of excellence. But its cultural impact exceeded its award performance. That it is a show that changed what people believed animation could do, changed the expectations of audiences who grew up with it, and the ambitions of creators who watched it and thought, that's what I want to make. Fact 144. Adventure Time is not set in a world where good triumphs over evil, because the universe guarantees it. It is set in a world where good has to be actively chosen, every time, by specific people making specific choices. Finn chose heroism when he could have chosen safety. Jake chose love when he could have chosen simplicity. Marceline chose to protect humans when she could have become something far worse. Princess Bubblegum chose her people over and over again until she learned to choose herself, too. Simon chose to remember love even after it had destroyed him. Now, these choices are what the show is about. Fact 145. The show had a specific, consistent answer to the question of what makes a good person. Not the absence of darkness, not perfect judgment, not strength or intelligence, but the willingness to keep trying, to keep noticing when you've caused harm and to sit with the discomfort of that rather than explaining it away. Finn caused harm. He apologized. He tried differently. The show repeated this pattern hundreds of times, with hundreds of characters, and never made it look easy. It looked hard. It looked like the most important hard thing there is. Fact 146. The original short film that launched the show runs just under 7 minutes. As it features a version of Finn rescuing a princess from the Ice King in a straightforward if charming fantasy adventure. Watching it today, knowing what the show became, is a strange and moving experience. Everything that would matter about the show is already there in embryonic form. The warmth, the strangeness, the willingness to be earnest, the sense that this world is real and worth caring about. Adventure Time was always going to be this. Ward knew what he was making, even when he was just making a short film for an animation anthology that nobody expected to go anywhere. Fact 147. One of the lesser-known details about the show's production is that the writing room played games to generate ideas. One game, called Exquisite Corpse, and involved one writer starting a story on a piece of paper, and another writer trying to finish it without having read the beginning. Ward admitted that this method usually produced terrible ideas, but occasionally it generated something genuinely unexpected that became the kernel of an episode. The willingness to play, to treat the creative process as something that could also be fun, shows up in the show's texture constantly. Fact 148. The show's handling of language is consistently interesting. Characters in OO have developed their own slang, algebraic, mathematical, rhombus, that functions as a future vernacular. words that survived the apocalypse or developed after it in ways that are never fully explained. This argot gives the world a depth that simple world-building description couldn't achieve. And it makes Ooh feel like a place that developed organically, not one that was designed. Fact 149. Princess Bubblegum has cloned herself at least once, creating a being with identical DNA who went through all her memories in compressed time via a machine. The ethical dimensions of this are left largely unexplored, which is the show's way of treating the strangeness of its world. Matter-of-factly, without editorial comment. Princess Bubblegum creates life. She has done it many times, in many ways. Whether all of those creations carry the same moral weight is a question the show knows better than to answer cleanly. Fact 150. The show's ending, when it came, was not triumphant. It was tender. Thus, the final image of the main series is not a battle won or a villain defeated, but a world continuing. Friends scattered across that world, each going about the work of their life, each carrying what they've survived. The show believed, as its deepest conviction, that this was enough. That continuation itself, with love and memory intact, was the best ending available in a world like this one. Fact 151. Finn's final words in the series proper reflect a character who has genuinely arrived somewhere. He is not the same boy who stumbled into the Candy Kingdom at 12 years old and asked Princess Bubblegum if she wanted to go on an adventure. He is older, quieter, more certain of what matters. He has learned through loss and error and time that heroism is not a state you achieve, but a practice you maintain. Yet he keeps trying. He keeps running toward people who need help. He keeps choosing kindness. He will keep choosing it. Fact 152. Jake's final words in the series carry the same weight from a different direction. Where Finn is earnest, Jake is settled. He has found his way to a kind of contentment that the show spent years earning for him. Not the false contentment of avoiding difficulty, but the real contentment of knowing what you value and having most of it. He loves Finn. He loves Lady. He loves his children. He loves sandwiches. He loves the particular quality of a peaceful afternoon. He has his whole life in his arms, and he holds it with open hands. Fact 153. The Marceline and Princess Bubblegum relationship, confirmed in the finale, that has been understood by many viewers as the show's central love story. Not between the nominal protagonists, but between two ancient and complicated women who found each other in the ruins of the world and kept finding each other across arguments and centuries and long gaps of silence, because some connections don't break even when they fracture. The show never announced this relationship as special. It simply showed it, with patience and care, and let it speak for itself. Fact 154. Simon Petrikov's last image in the main series is that of a free man, old, confused, still wearing the clothes of the person he has been for 1,000 years, standing in a world that has changed utterly from the one he remembers. He survived. The show makes no claim that this survival is easy, but he survived, and that is everything. Fact 155. The show generated a fan community of remarkable depth and longevity. The fandom's theoretical work, its analysis of the timeline, the Mushroom War, the cosmology of the dead worlds, the nature of catalyst comets and past lives, often arrived at conclusions that were later confirmed by the show. The writers paid attention to the fandom. They did not pander to it, but they noticed when a reading was correct, and sometimes they let the reading become canon. Fact 156. The show's influence on music outside animation is documented and real. Artists in indie rock, folk, and bedroom pop have cited Adventure Time's original songs as inspiration. Olivia Olson's performances in particular drew an audience that might not have otherwise watched the show. Now, the album We Are Finn and Jake and other compilations of the show's music found listeners far outside the children's animation market. Fact 157. One of Adventure Time's most repeated structural motifs is the journey to a specific place that turns out to be something different from what the characters expected. They go to rescue someone and find they don't want to be rescued. They go to win a fight and find the fight was never the point. They go looking for something and find themselves instead. The show understood that the journey and the destination are never the same thing, and that the gap between them is where the most interesting material lives. Fact 158. The Ice Crown, after the events of the finale, is worn by Gunter, who becomes the Ice Thing, a new entity that carries the crown's power without being Simon and without being what the crown originally made Simon into. It is the show's way of acknowledging that the crown's story is not over, that the pattern will continue in some form, that the universe generates these tragedies cyclically. But it is also the show's way of acknowledging that this particular tragedy, Simon's, is finished. The crown has moved on. Simon is free. Fact 159. The tree fort that Finn and Jake called home for the entire series was still standing when the show ended. It was damaged, but standing. In the distant lands, special together again, the tree appears both in the afterlife landscape as a memory, intact and warm and lit from within. The tree fort is not just a house. It is the show's symbol of home in the fullest sense, the place that holds you, the place you return to, the place that carries you, even when you're far from it. Fact 160. Adventure Time premiered on April 5th, 2010. It ended on September 3rd, 2018. In 8 years, it told a story about the end of the world and what grew from the ruins, about love maintained across impossible distances and times, about the specific courage required to keep being good in a universe that doesn't guarantee it. It told this story with candy colors and monster fights, and a dog who liked sandwiches and a girl who played bass guitar in a cave, and an old man who had forgotten everything except the instinct to reach for what he'd loved. It told the story gently. It trusted you to feel the weight of it. That's all 160. Every single one of them real, and every one of them worth knowing. Thank you for spending this time in with me. If you made it all the way here, whether you're wide awake or drifting out, you've been on a long, slow journey through one of the most genuinely remarkable things that television ever quietly produced. I hope it felt worth it. I think it did. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button for dozing off time. Every subscriber is someone who's found this little corner of the internet and decided to stay, and that means the world. Drop a like if you're feeling generous. And if there's a show you'd love to fall asleep to facts about, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. Sleep well wherever you are. Come along with me.